Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Just Love Them podcast. I'm your host, Cherie Best. The goal of this podcast is to come to a place of understanding, peace, and the ability to love those whose choices are different from yours without reserve. It is a 3-day conference on personal improvement. I am sitting near the front and have a good view of the speaker on stage. The speaker is talking about forgiveness. She asks the question, who do you need to forgive? And she invites us to make a list. I pick up my pen and poise it on my notebook, ready to write down what my brain brings to mind. I have done this type of exercise before, but it has been a while, and I'm sure there will be names I haven't worked on before. As I scan my brain, several names come to mind. I write them down in my notebook. After a couple of minutes of silence, allowing us to think and write, the speaker asks, "Did you put yourself on that list?" A small wave of shock rolls through me like an electrical zing. I've never actually considered that I might need to forgive myself. As I tell this to my mind argues back that I'm sure I've been taught this before, but it has never sunk in until now. I pick up my pen and write the word myself on my list. My mind whirls. What do I need to forgive myself for? That question was like throwing open the lid on Pandora's box. Suddenly, all the mistakes, imperfections, and character flaws I could identify in all my years of motherhood came streaming out in a huge wave of emotion. All my mistakes, all the times I was impatient, annoyed, got too angry, all the times I disciplined out of anger, it all came rushing at me in one gigantic wave. I felt like a despicable human being. Did I even deserve to be forgiven? There are two kinds of forgiveness. One is when God forgives us. The other is when we forgive each other for the injuries that we cause each other. In the book, The Doctrine and Covenants, section 64, verse 10, God says, "I will forgive whom I will forgive, but of you it is required to forgive all men." I love that verse because it talks about both kinds. It talks about God's forgiveness. I will forgive whom I will forgive. But it also talks about our forgiving each other of the injuries we cause when he says, "But of you it is required to forgive all men." We are talking about the second kind today, forgiving the injuries we cause each other. Here's the thing about injury. It talks in the language of being triggered. Its language sounds like shame, resentment, anger, hurt, annoyance, and frustration. It manifests as being offended. Its habit is blame. And we don't just get over it. We might stuff it down, but we don't just get over it. So forgiveness. Learn to listen to your injury from the position of your higher self. That manifests as reframing, which is the courage to look at a situation from all sides. And it looks like doing our best to look at the situation through God's eyes. It looks like asking for the Savior to hold the injury in our behalf. It is releasing that emotional pain to Him. And its habit, its beautiful habit, is peace. I absolutely love Dieter F. Uchtdorf's depiction of the prodigal son. And it reminds me about how God will respond to us, because are we not all the prodigal son? So sit back and get comfortable, because I'm going to read you a story. Except if you're driving. If you're driving while you're listening to this, don't get too comfortable. It begins with these simple words, and I'm quoting Dieter F. Uchtdorf now. A certain man had two sons. Immediately, we learn of a heartbreaking conflict. One son tells his father he is through with life at home. He wants his freedom. He wants to leave behind the culture and the teachings of his parents. He asks for his share of the inheritance now. Can you imagine what the father felt when he heard this? When he realized that what his son wanted more than anything else was to leave the family and perhaps never return. The son must have felt a thrill of adventure and excitement. At long last, he was on his own, free from the principles and rules and the culture of his youth. He could finally make his own choices without being influenced by his parents. No more guilt. He could bask in the acceptance of like-minded community and live life on his own terms. Arriving in a faraway country, he quickly made new friends and began living the life he had always dreamed of. He must have been a favorite of many, for he spent money freely. His new friends, beneficiaries of his prodigality, did not judge him. They celebrated, applauded, and championed his choices. Had there been social media in that time, surely he would have filled pages with animated photos of laughing friends, hashtag living my best life, hashtag never happier, hashtag should have done this long ago. But the party did not last. It rarely does. Two things happened. First, he ran out of money. And second, a famine swept through the land. As the problems worsened, he panicked. The once unstoppable, jubilant high roller could now not afford a single meal, let alone a place to stay. How would he survive? He had been generous to his friends. Would they help him now? I can see him asking for a little support, just for now, until he got back on his feet. The scriptures tell us, no man gave unto him. Desperate to remain alive, he found a local farmer who hired him to feed swine. Extremely hungry now, abandoned and alone, the young man must have wondered how things could have gone so terribly, dreadfully wrong. It wasn't just an empty stomach that troubled him, it was an empty soul. He had been so sure that giving in to his worldly desires would make him happy, that moral laws were obstacles to that happiness. Now he knew better, and oh, what a price he had to pay for that knowledge. As the physical and spiritual hunger grew, his thoughts returned to his father. Would he help him after all that had happened? Even the humblest of his father's servants had food to eat and shelter from the storm. But return to his father? Never. Confess to his village that he had squandered his inheritance? Impossible. Face the neighbors who surely had warned him that is disgracing his family and breaking his parents' heart? Return to his old friends after boasting how he was breaking free? Unbearable. But the hunger, loneliness, and remorse simply wouldn't go away until he came to himself. He knew what he needed to do. Now let us go back to the father, the broken-hearted master of the house. How many hundreds, perhaps thousands of hours had he spent worrying about his son? How many times had he looked down the very road his son had taken and relived the penetrating loss he had felt as his son walked away? How many prayers had he offered in the deep of night, pleading with God that his son would be safe and that he would discover truth and that he would return? And then one day the father looked out on that lonely road, the road that leads home, and sees a distant figure walking toward him. Is it possible? Though the individual is a great way off, the father knows in an instant it is his son. He runs to him, throws his arms around him, and kisses him. "Father," the son cries out in words he must have rehearsed 1,000 times. "I have sinned against both heaven and you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. All I ask is that you take me in as a hired servant." But the father scarcely let him finish. Tears in his eyes, He commands his servants, bring the finest robe in the house and place it on my son's shoulders. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Make a feast to celebrate. My son has returned. Unquote. I wonder how hard it was for that son to forgive himself as his father had forgiven him. Often it's easier to have compassion for someone else than we do for ourselves. And I think that's why I love the story as told by Dieter Uchtdorf, because it really gives you insight into compassion for both sides. What would you say to someone else if they told you your story as though it was their own? And so there I was, sitting at the conference with a flood of emotions washing over me after asking, what do I need to forgive myself for? As I reach out to God with my mind for help and understanding, the image of a baby learning to walk pops into my head. In my mind, I see the baby take 3 steps, wobble, lose its balance, and fall. This is totally normal. It is learning. I would never say that baby is bad at walking. That would be absurd. It is learning. Suddenly, God interrupts my thoughts and says to me, and so are you. And so it began. At that conference, the process of learning to forgive myself began. The journey has been long. It has not been easy. Sometimes I have regressed and gone back into the negative language that I have allowed to play in my mind. But then I catch myself, correct my negative talk, forgive myself some more, and keep going. It's a process. Truly, it's like peeling an onion, one layer at a time, as my cruelty over my own imperfections gets smaller and smaller. One day recently, I was sitting at the computer reflecting on the podcast episode with my daughter, Madeline. Perhaps you listened to it, and thinking about what our home was like when we were raising our children. Another electrical zing as I realized that I truly did the best I knew how, and so did my husband. Were we too strict? Yes. Too controlling? Yes. Uptight, overbearing, and rigid? Yes. Operating on fear? Yes. But our hearts wanted to be the very best parents we could be, and we were trying to do just that with 110% effort. God looked on with patience and gave us help as we asked for it and as we were ready for it. He also knew that we would totally screw up, and he forgave us. We have asked forgiveness from our children for things we wish we would have done differently, things we would do differently if we could go back and change it, now that we're older and wiser and can look back with clarity. What was still missing was my ability to totally and fully forgive myself, to extend the hand of compassion, understanding, and grace to myself. It has come off in layers, like an onion, but at the core, I was still beating myself up. I was being disappointed in myself. I was shaming my mistakes and berating myself for not having done it perfectly the first time, especially when I tried so hard. Feeling guilty that I could not see my fallacies in the moment. Never quite good enough. And so I sat at my computer contemplating. For once, I was able to look back, reflect, and suddenly, without even trying, I could see myself as though I was someone else and give myself grace. I had done the best I could. The only one who was demanding perfection from me was me. And at the time, I thought God. But that was a false belief. God was patient as I learned how to walk, and He has given me grace. God is patient and has given you grace. I am not perfect. You are not perfect. I believe God watches us with a twinkle in His eye and knows exactly what mistakes we are going to make. He knows the messes we're going to create and forgives us and loves us just as much. I imagine His glee as I finally get it on this topic or that topic, and as I layer by layer figure it out. Just like that child learning how to walk, I realize I am going to fall again and again. But as I keep getting up and trying again and again, I gradually get better and better at walking until I figure it out. Just as we would never expect a toddler to figure it out immediately and just walk, it's not healthy to expect that of ourselves or anyone else. And so as I sit in my office, I feel a wave of relief, of letting go, of grace. I finally forgive myself. And so can you. You may be asking, but Cherie, how? You can't just say you're going to forgive yourself and it happens. No, it doesn't. Remember how it took me a long time? I'd like to teach you a little exercise to help. It's called a forgive yourself sandwich. You may have heard of a prayer sandwich. This is a forgive yourself sandwich. It's a powerful exercise. You'll need a paper and a pen. You can also do this on a computer, but there is something therapeutic about writing with a pen or a pencil on a piece of paper that gives your brain time to process. So I do recommend that, but you can do either. You also will want a quiet space and enough time to not be in a hurry. Start with a prayer, asking for God's help in this process to forgive yourself. That's the first step. You always want to invite Him in to help you. The second step is you're going to write a letter to yourself. And you're going to say all the things that you are holding against yourself and that you're beating yourself up for. You're going to write it out. When you're done, turn your paper over or grab a new piece and you're ready for step 3. In step 3, you're going to write back to yourself. Hold your pen on the paper. And from your higher self, you're going to write. Your higher self is the parts of you that's your best version of yourself, the compassionate, good listener, higher self. Put that pen on the paper and just hold it there. Whatever comes into your brain is what you're going to write. You're writing back, and you just write whatever comes. Trust me on this. This is powerful. Do not filter it. Write what comes. When you're done, step 4 is another prayer. In this prayer, you're going to take that letter back from yourself, that higher self of yours. You're going to take it to God in prayer and ask Him to help you forgive yourself and to put truth and the understanding that you received in your letter into not only your mind, but into your heart. When you can get that higher self, that compassion and the things that you have written back to yourself, when you get that into your mind, then all that negative chatter, that negative talk that goes in and beats you up and that you just let play without challenging, you just believe it, it takes that away. So that's why you need to get it into your mind. And then you need to get it into your heart, because when it's in your heart, that's when you believe it. It has to be in your heart. When something's in your mind, it's a good place for it to be. If it's a good thought, it's a bad place for it to be if it's a bad thought. But when that trickles down into your heart, whatever it's a positive or a negative thought, that's when you believe it. And you need to know in your heart that you're forgiven. So you're going to pray for that God is going to put it into your mind and into your heart. So let's review just really quickly. This is the forgive yourself sandwich. Starts with a prayer. asking God to be with you through this exercise to help you be successful and help you to forgive yourself. Second step is you're going to write a letter to yourself, and you're going to say all the things that you're holding against yourself and beating yourself up for. Step 3 is getting a new piece of paper or turning it over, and with your higher self responding back as though you're someone else, as though you're responding to someone else who's beating themselves up, what you're going to say. And you write literally what comes into your brain without filtering it. Step 4 is another prayer, taking that letter back to God and asking Him to help you forgive yourself and to put that truth into your mind and into your heart. This exercise is powerful. It's time to forgive yourself. Like an onion, this may be something that you do in layers. Remember, I said it took me a long time. Sometimes it's layers. Now, maybe you have a sharp knife and you can slice straight through that onion to the very middle and be done with it. For me, it was layers. This exercise can bring you forgiveness, and forgiveness for yourself or for anyone else. Forgiveness clears space so that you can receive, love, so that you can receive peace, so that you can receive joy, all the good stuff. So clear the space and be ready to receive. It may be that it would be helpful to have someone to walk you through this process and take it to a deeper level. If you would like some personalized one-on-one help, reach out, and together we can go deeper to help you get to a place of peace. You are meant to feel peace. God wants you to have peace. I will leave my contact information in the show notes for you. It's been a pleasure spending this time together. Please join me again next time for another episode of Just Love Them.